My husband and his greedy mistress were toasting to their brilliant plan to blindside me with divorce papers and steal my legacy, right in the middle of our company's 5th anniversary gala. But they had no idea that 2 weeks ago, I had silently drained our joint accounts of my entire inheritance. Tonight, I would not just expose their betrayal to the Manhattan elite, I was going to bury them in a grave of absolute financial ruin. My name is Elena Vance, and at 32 years old, I had mastered the art of becoming a statue of ice wrapped in designer silk. The grand ballroom of the Grand Monarch Hotel in Manhattan was a suffocating cage of gold leaf and crystal chandeliers, buzzing with the chatter of New York's elite. This was supposed to be the crowning moment for Horizon Ventures, the night we celebrated our 5th anniversary and the massive success that had turned my husband into a titan of industry. I stood in the center of the room, clutching a flute of vintage champagne that had long since gone warm, wearing a smile that felt painted onto my face. However, the man of the hour was conspicuously absent. Marcus Thorne, my husband and the CEO of this empire, had been missing from the floor for over 45 minutes, in a room filled with 200 of the most influential people in the city. An absence that long was not just rude, it was a statement. And he was not the only one. Julia, my personal secretary, and the woman I had foolishly called my best friend for a decade, had vanished at the exact same time. The air in the ballroom felt heavy, thick with the unspoken rumors swirling around me. I could feel the weight of their gazes, the board members, the hungry competitors, and even my own distant relatives were watching me with a mix of pity and predatory anticipation. They were vultures circling a dying animal, waiting for the scandal to break. My mind drifted back to the last 2 weeks. It had started with the late-night phone calls Marcus thought I did not hear. Then came the coldness, a physical distance that felt like a wall of glass had been erected between us in our own bed. But the final straw was the open safe I had walked in on 3 days ago. He had slammed it shut with a guilty start, but not before I saw the distinctive blue folders of our offshore accounts. He had looked at me then with eyes that held no love, only a calculating assessment, as if I were an asset he was preparing to liquidate. Mrs. Thorne. The voice startled me, and a sudden splash of cold liquid soaked through the fabric of my silver evening gown. A young waiter stood before me, his face pale with terror, an empty tray trembling in his hands. A glass of red wine was dripping down my side, staining the silk like a fresh wound. "Oh, God, I am so sorry. Mrs. Thorne, I didn't mean to," the boy stammered, his eyes wide with panic. "Please, don't fire me." I looked down at the stain. Ironically, this clumsy accident was the perfect excuse I needed to escape this suffocating performance. I offered him a calm, almost gentle smile that seemed to confuse him more than anger would have. "It is fine. Accidents happen," I said, my voice steady. "Do not worry about it. Just go clean up the mess on the floor." Ignoring the hushed gasps of the onlookers, I turned and walked away with my head held high. I did not head toward the restrooms. Instead, I moved toward the East Wing corridor. As I stepped off the marble floor of the ballroom and onto the plush carpet of the hallway, the noise of the party began to fade. The lively jazz band became a distant hum, replaced by the eerie silence of the VIP section. The corridor was long and dimly lit by sconces that cast long, dancing shadows against the walls. Every step I took felt heavy, yet inevitable. I was not walking toward a sanctuary to clean my dress. I was walking toward the truth. My intuition, honed by generations of Vance women who had survived betrayals before me, was screaming. I knew exactly where they were. At the end of the hall lay the chairman's suite, a private room reserved strictly for top-level negotiations. But tonight, I knew the only thing being negotiated behind those doors was my destruction. I stopped in front of the heavy oak door, my hand hovering over the handle, my heart beating a cold, steady rhythm against my ribs. I stood frozen outside the mahogany door of the chairman's suite. It was not fully latched, leaving a sliver of space just wide enough for the sounds of betrayal to bleed through the heavy wood. The silence of the hallway was shattered by a low, guttural laugh I knew better than my own heartbeat, followed by a high-pitched giggle that made my skin crawl. It was Julia, but the voice was not the professional, deferential tone she used when handing me my schedule or discussing charity galas. It was thick with lust, alcohol, and a mocking amusement that sliced through me like a razor. God, Marcus, stop. You are bad, Julia purred, the sound wet and breathless against the quiet of the corridor. What if your little wifey comes looking for you? She looked so pathetic standing there all alone. My stomach churned, a violent twist of nausea gripping my insides. Hearing her call me pathetic after I had paid for her mother's heart surgery just last year felt like a physical blow to the gut. Let her wait, Marcus's voice rumbled back, dripping with a contempt I had never heard before. Elena is clueless. She probably thinks I am in a meeting saving the company. The woman has no idea, absolutely no idea, that her little fairy tale is about to end. I leaned closer, pressing my eye to the crack in the door, needing to see the horror to believe it fully. The room was bathed in the warm amber glow of the mood lighting. On the sprawling Chesterfield leather sofa, two shadows were intertwined in a grotesque display of infidelity. My breath hitched in my throat, threatening to choke me. On the Persian rug, discarded like a piece of trash, lay the limited edition Patek Philippe watch I had gifted Marcus only 7 days ago for his birthday. It was lying face down next to the shimmering heap of Julia's emerald green dress, the slit fabric puddling on the floor. Marcus shifted, his hand tracing the curve of Julia's spine as he spoke the words that would seal his fate. Just listen to me, baby. Just bear with it for 2 more weeks. That is all I need. Once the final papers for the asset transfer are signed, once I have full control of the Vance family trust, I am going to kick her out to the street with nothing but the clothes on her back. Then Horizon Ventures will be ours. Truly ours. Promise me, Julia whined, her voice turning demanding, almost petulant. I am tired of hiding. Marcus, I want to be the one on your arm. I want everyone to know. They will, Marcus assured her, his voice thick with arrogance and deceit. I promise, as soon as I get rid of her, we will have the wedding of the century. You will be the Queen of New York, and Elena will be nothing more than a forgotten memory. A sharp, searing pain shot through my chest, radiating outward until my fingertips went numb. It felt as if someone had reached inside my ribcage and squeezed my heart until it burst. The air in the hallway seemed to vanish. These were the 2 people I trusted most in the world. My husband, whom I had supported through every failure, and my best friend, whom I had treated like a sister. They were not just cheating on me, they were conspiring to destroy my entire existence. I wanted to scream. I wanted to kick the door open and tear them apart with my bare hands until the room ran red. But then, a cold, hard clarity washed over me. It was a memory, sharp and distinct. 2 weeks ago, the meeting with my family lawyer. The suspicion that had gnawed at me then had seemed paranoid, but I had listened to the whisper of intuition. I had moved every single cent. The inheritance is gone. Marcus, you are fighting for an empty vault. The thought acted like a bucket of ice water over a raging fire. The pain in my chest did not disappear, but it crystallized into something solid, sharp, and dangerous. My trembling stopped. I was no longer a victim standing in the hallway. I was a witness. And soon, I would be their executioner. Slowly, with a hand that was now steady, I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. I raised it to the crack in the door, ensuring the lens caught the watch on the floor and the faces of the two traitors on the couch. I recorded 10 seconds of their damning conversation. It was enough. I tapped the stop button, slipped the phone back into my bag, and took a step back. I did not make a sound. I turned away from the door, leaving them to their premature celebration, and began my walk back to the light. I pushed open the heavy door to the ladies' powder room and locked it behind me with a decisive click. The silence here was different from the hallway. It was sterile, cold, and echoing. I gripped the edges of the marble sink so hard my knuckles turned white and stared into the mirror. The woman staring back was someone I did not recognize. Gone was the anxious, doting wife who had been fretting over a wine stain just minutes ago. In her place stood a stranger. My eyes, usually soft and accommodating, now held a glint as sharp as a razor blade. The tears that had threatened to fall earlier had evaporated completely, burned away by the heat of pure, unadulterated rage. I reached into my beaded clutch and pulled out my lipstick. It was a shade of deep crimson, darker than the wine on my dress. I applied it with steady hands, tracing the curve of my lips with surgical precision. "Get it together, Elena," I whispered to my reflection, my voice sounding foreign in the tiled room. "This is not a tragedy. This is a performance." I capped the lipstick and smoothed my hair. Tonight would be my masterpiece. I would not just leave him. I would dismantle him, piece by piece, in front of the very audience he lived to impress. As I stared at my reflection, memories flooded back, but they no longer carried the warmth of nostalgia. I remembered the desperate look in Marcus's eyes 5 years ago. Horizon Ventures was not a titan then. It was a sinking ship, drowning in debt. I was the one who wrote the check. I was the one who poured $10 million of my inheritance into his dream when every bank in New York had slammed the door in his face. I had built the throne he was sitting on, and now he thought he could kick me off of it to replace me with my own secretary. My father had warned me. My mother had begged me to get a prenup, which I foolishly watered down because I thought it was unromantic. Love had made me blind, deaf, and utterly stupid. But that blindness was gone now. My mind felt crystal clear, sharper than it had ever been. I was not losing a husband. I was shedding a parasite. I pulled out my phone again and dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang once before being answered. Mrs. Thorne, the gruff voice of Arthur, the head of security, answered. He had served the Vance family for 30 years. His loyalty lay with my blood, not my husband's title. "Arthur," I said, my voice low and commanding, stripping away any pleasantries. "I need you to override the main projector system in the ballroom. Link it to the live feed from the security camera in the chairman's suite. Do not ask me why. Just have it ready on my signal." "Understood, Miss Vance," he replied, reverting to my maiden name as if he sensed the seismic shift in the universe. I hung up and took a deep breath. The wine stain was still there on my silver gown, but I wore it like a badge of honor now. I pushed the doors open and stepped back into the cacophony of the gala. The noise hit me, but this time I did not shrink. I glided through the crowd, a smile playing on my lips that looked welcoming to the casual observer, but hid a lethal intent. I was a hunter now, and the ballroom was my hunting ground. I spotted my parents near the ice sculpture, talking to 3 of the majority shareholders. I approached them, radiating a manic sort of excitement. "Mom, Dad," I said, leaning in conspiratorially, grabbing my mother's hand. "You have to gather everyone. Marcus has been planning a massive surprise." My mother looked at me, concerned. "Elena, are you all right? Where is Marcus?" "He is in the VIP suite with Julia," I whispered loud enough for the shareholders to hear, my voice trembling with feigned anticipation. "They are finalizing a secret project that is going to change the future of this company. He wants everyone to see it. It is his big reveal." The shareholders' eyes lit up. Greed was such an easy emotion to manipulate. "A secret project," one of them asked, raising an eyebrow. "Is that why he has been gone so long?" "Exactly." I lied effortlessly, but he is shy about it. "We need to go to him. It is supposed to be an intimate reveal for the people who matter most." The rumor spread like wildfire. A secret deal. A massive merger. The excitement rippled through the room, masking the disaster that was waiting for them. They thought they were walking toward a celebration, completely unaware that I was leading them to a slaughterhouse. I stepped onto the raised platform of the main stage, the heels of my shoes clicking rhythmically against the polished wood. The jazz band fell silent at my gesture, and a hush descended over the grand ballroom. I plucked the microphone from its stand, the cool metal grounding the fire that was raging beneath my skin. I looked out at the sea of faces, over 200 of New York's most influential figures, all staring back at me with bated breath. They were no longer guests, they were my audience, and I was about to direct the most brutal scene of their lives. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention? Please." My voice boomed through the speakers, steady and commanding. "I know many of you have been wondering where my husband and his dedicated assistant have vanished to for the last 45 minutes. A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the crowd. I widened my smile, infusing it with a manic sort of brightness that bordered on hysteria. "Well, I am thrilled to announce that Marcus and Julia are preparing a very special, heartfelt performance to honor your unwavering support over the last 5 years," I announced, my voice rising with false enthusiasm. They wanted this moment to be intimate, a raw display of their true selves. And they are waiting for us right now in the chairman's suite. I invite you all. No, I insist that you all join me to witness this spectacle with your own eyes. I did not wait for their reaction. I stepped down from the stage and began walking toward the East Wing with the stride of a general marching into battle. The crowd, driven by the irresistible pull of curiosity and the promise of a show, began to move. It started as a trickle and quickly turned into a flood. I could hear the rustle of expensive silk and the murmur of confused voices behind me, but I did not look back. I led them like a Pied Piper, guiding the sheep toward the edge of the cliff. My mother hurried to catch up with me, her hand gripping my elbow with frantic strength. Her face was pale, her eyes darting around the moving mass of people. "Elena, what are you doing?" she hissed, her voice trembling. This is madness. You cannot just lead everyone to the private suite." I gently but firmly removed her hand from my arm, keeping my eyes fixed on the double doors at the end of the hallway. I did not say a word to her. I could not let her maternal instinct derail the train that was already hurtling off the tracks. We reached the carpeted corridor of the VIP section. As the front of the crowd pressed in behind me, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The heavy oak door of the chairman's suite was just ahead, and the silence of the hallway was being rhythmically violated by the sounds coming from within. The moans were unmistakable, loud and uninhibited, echoing off the walls. The group of guests closest to me froze. I saw a group of young investment bankers cover their mouths, their eyes dancing with immature amusement as they stifled giggles. Behind them, the older board members and their wives frowned, tilting their heads in confusion and growing disgust. Is someone hurt?" an elderly socialite whispered loudly, clutching her pearls. "I do not think that is pain. Martha," her husband muttered, his face turning a deep shade of crimson. The tension was thick enough to choke on. They wanted to stop, to turn away from the impropriety, but their morbid curiosity held them hostage. They had to know. I stopped 3 feet from the door and locked eyes with the head of security, who was standing like a stone statue by the entrance. He knew the drill. The latch had already been disabled. I gave him a sharp nod. "Open it," I mouthed. The guard raised his fist and struck the wood hard, once, twice. It was a mock knock, a theatrical gesture. He did not wait for an answer. With a heavy shove, he pushed the double doors. They flew open with a violent bang, bouncing off the interior walls, and in that split second, the trap snapped shut. The photographers I had anonymously tipped off and positioned in the adjacent service alcove surged forward, blinding the hallway with a strobe light effect of camera flashes. Click, click, click. The white light illuminated the dark interior of the room like lightning striking a crime scene, shattering the illusion of Marcus Thorne, the dignified CEO, into a million irreparable shards. The scene before us was not a romantic tableau, but a sordid, frantic mess of flesh and panic. Marcus and Julia were completely exposed, their limbs entangled on the leather sofa in a way that left absolutely nothing to the imagination. The sudden intrusion of light and 200 pairs of eyes stripped them of every ounce of power they thought they possessed. For a heartbeat, there was a vacuum of sound, a collective intake of breath from the crowd. Then, absolute chaos erupted. "No, no, get out! Get out!" Julia shrieked, her voice tearing through the air like a banshee. She scrambled backward, clutching a small velvet throw pillow to her chest, but it was woefully insufficient to hide the red flush of shame spreading across her skin. Her face, usually composed and smug, was twisted into a mask of pure terror as she tried to hide behind the sofa. Marcus fared no better. The man who had walked red carpets with the swagger of a king was reduced to a stumbling, pathetic figure. He lunged toward the door, trying to shield his body with one hand while reaching for the handle with the other, but his foot caught in the tangle of Julia's discarded emerald dress, and he slipped. He crashed hard onto the floor, his knees hitting the wood with a sickening thud, landing right at my feet in a heap of uncoordinated limbs. The ballroom exploded. The shock transformed instantly into a roar of judgment. I heard the sharp whispers of the board members' wives, their voices cutting like knives. "Disgusting!" One woman hissed loud enough to be heard over the camera shutters. "Absolutely vile! Is that our secretary? I thought they were practically sisters?" Another replied with a sneer. "Animals. Both of them." I stood perfectly still in the doorway, an island of ice in a sea of fire. I looked down at Marcus, who was frantically trying to pull on his trousers, his hands shaking so badly he could not manage the zipper. Our eyes met. His were wide with shock and humiliation. Mine were dead. I felt nothing for him. No pity. No love. Just the cold satisfaction of a debt being paid. Suddenly, a blur of motion swept past me. My father, a man who had never raised a hand in violence in all the 32 years I had known him, surged forward. His face was purple with rage. He grabbed Marcus by the shoulder as he tried to stand and delivered a backhanded slap that echoed through the room like a gunshot. The force of it sent Marcus stumbling back down to the floor. "You filth!" my father roared, his voice trembling with the force of his anger. "You dare defile my daughter's name?" In my company, Julia was sobbing now, a loud, ugly sound. "Please, please, listen. It is not what you think. We were talking. Marcus." "Tell them," she wailed, reaching out a hand toward the crowd as if begging for salvation. "Save it, you home-wrecking trash!" the wife of our biggest investor spat out, stepping forward to shield her own daughter's eyes from the scene. The investors were already turning away, their faces grim. I heard Mr. Henderson, the chairman of the board, speaking to his associates. shaking his head in disbelief. This is a disaster, a complete PR nightmare. Horizon Ventures cannot survive a scandal of this magnitude. I am pulling my support effective immediately. I will not have my name attached to this circus. Hearing the threat to his money seemed to snap Marcus out of his shock. The shame on his face vanished, replaced by a dark, feral ugliness. He ignored my father, ignored the cameras, and turned his venom solely on me. He realized the timing was too perfect to be an accident. "You," Marcus snarled, pointing a shaking finger at me as he finally managed to button his pants, his hair wild and his chest heaving. "You did this, you crazy witch. You set me up, you knew. You knew exactly what you were doing." He lunged toward me, his eyes bulging with manic fury, looking less like a CEO and more like a cornered animal. "Tell them." "Elena, tell them you staged this. You ruined everything because you are a jealous frigid." He did not get to finish the sentence. 2 security guards stepped in front of me, blocking his path, but his words hung in the air, stripping away his last shred of dignity and revealing the abusive, gaslighting monster he had always kept hidden beneath his expensive suits. I did not flinch at his venom. His spittle landed inches from the hem of my ruined dress, but I did not take a single step back. Instead, I simply raised the microphone, which was still live in my hand, ensuring that every syllable I spoke would be amplified, recorded, and burned into the memories of everyone present. "You say I trapped you," I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm, a stark contrast to his sweaty, frantic hysteria. "I did not unzip your pants, Marcus. I did not force you to sleep with my secretary in the middle of our 5th anniversary gala. You are the one who chose to betray me. You are the one who decided that your vows were nothing more than a joke." I turned my gaze away from him and swept it across the shock-still audience, addressing the board members directly. For 2 years, this man and the woman cowering behind the sofa have been lying to all of us. Tonight, I stood outside that door and listened to them plot to divorce me, seize control of my family's trust, and leave me on the street while they lived off my inheritance. Marcus sneered, a desperate, ugly look crossing his face. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and tried to straighten his spine, clinging to the last vestige of his perceived authority. He laughed, but it sounded brittle. "So, what if we did?" he challenged, his voice cracking with false bravado. "You cannot do anything about it. Elena, you are pathetic. I am the CEO of Horizon Ventures. I control the accounts. I control the investments. Even if you divorce me, I have the power of attorney. You are just a housewife with a fancy last name. Without me to run this company, you are nothing but a rich girl with no brain." The crowd murmured, some looking at me with pity, expecting me to crumble under his assertion of dominance. But I smiled. It was the smile of a predator watching prey walk into a snare. "Do you really think I am just a pretty doll with a hollow head? Marcus, do you honestly believe I am that stupid?" I stepped closer to him, towering over his kneeling form. "You should have spent less time in bed with Julia and more time reading the contracts you signed." His brow furrowed in confusion. "The voting rights," I said, letting the words hang in the air like an executioner's blade. "The majority shares of Horizon Ventures are in my name. Marcus. They always have been. The document you signed 3 years ago gave you operational oversight, not ownership. I never transferred the voting rights to you. I just let you play boss because it made you feel like a big man. But legally, you are nothing more than an employee, an at-will employee." Marcus went pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, and as the majority shareholder and chairwoman of the board, I announced, my voice booming through the speakers, "I am hereby terminating your employment as CEO, effective immediately. You are fired, Marcus. You have zero authority here. "You are trespassing." A gasp went through the room, followed by a stunned silence. Julia let out a choked sob, her legs giving way as she slid down the wall. She looked at Marcus, then at me, her eyes wide with the horrifying realization that the golden parachute she had been trying to steal had just been set on fire. She was not the mistress of a CEO anymore. She was just the unemployed lover of a broke man. "Arthur," I called out to the head of security, who was waiting with a grim satisfaction on his face. "Please remove these two from my building. If they resist, call the police and have them arrested for public indecency and trespassing." Two burly guards stepped forward, grabbing Marcus by his arms. He tried to shake them off, shouting incoherently, but his power was gone. He was hauled to his feet, his shirt half unbuttoned, looking small and defeated. Julia was pulled up next, clutching her dress to her chest, sobbing loudly as they were marched through the parting crowd. The guests recoiled as they passed, pulling back their skirts and suits as if the couple were carrying a contagious disease. No one offered them a hand. No one offered them a kind word. They were social lepers, exiled from the kingdom they thought they owned. I watched them disappear through the service exit, then took a deep breath. I turned back to the crowd, smoothing the front of my dress. "I deeply apologize for the unsightly end to the evening," I said, my voice returning to the polished, gracious tone of a perfect hostess. "However, under the circumstances, I believe it is best we conclude the gala here. Horizon Ventures will be undergoing some necessary restructuring, but I assure you, the future is bright. Thank you all for coming." I placed the microphone on a nearby table and walked away, leaving the whispers and the chaos behind me. I did not look back. I had won the battle, but the war was just beginning. The morning sun sliced through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the law firm conference room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the sterile air. It was 9 in the morning, barely 12 hours since the gala had imploded, but the atmosphere inside was already suffocating. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table, my hands clasped loosely over a pristine manila folder. Across from me sat Marcus. He had attempted to pull himself together, wearing a fresh navy suit, but the dark circles under his eyes and the slight tremor in his hands betrayed him. Next to him, his lawyer, a sweaty man named Mr. Friedman, looked like he would rather be anywhere else on earth. Marcus cleared his throat, adjusting his tie with a false sense of bravado. He clearly thought the law was his shield. "Look, Elena," Marcus started, his voice raspy. "Last night was unfortunate. You humiliated me. But let us be adults about this. New York is an equitable distribution state. Regardless of what happened, I am entitled to 50% of our marital assets. That includes the cash in our joint accounts and the liquid assets from the trust you co-mingled." He leaned back, a smirk ghosting across his lips. "You might have the company, but I will walk away with enough money to start 10 companies. So, let us cut a deal and avoid a messy trial." I did not speak. I simply nodded to my lawyer. "Mr. Sterling." Sterling. A man with eyes like flint and a mind like a steel trap slid a thick stack of documents across the table. They landed with a heavy thud in front of Marcus. "Mr. Thorne," Sterling began, his tone dry and clinical. "Before we discuss assets, we need to discuss liabilities. Specifically, the $500,000 in company funds you diverted to purchase jewelry, a luxury apartment lease, and a Porsche for Miss Julia Santos." Marcus paled slightly but waved his hand dismissively. "That is an accounting error. I will pay it back. Deduct it from my share of the inheritance money in the joint account." I smiled then. It was a small, dangerous thing. "What share?" "Marcus," I asked softly. "You might want to check the balance of that account." Marcus frowned. He pulled out his phone, his thumb tapping furiously against the screen to access his banking app. A moment of silence stretched in the room, heavy and thick. Then, the color drained from his face so fast it looked like he might faint. 0, he whispered, staring at the screen in horror. What? This is a glitch. It says 0 balance. Where is the money? There was over $20 million in there yesterday. He looked up at me, panic rising in his eyes. You moved it. You cannot do that. That is marital property. The judge will throw you in jail for hiding assets. I did not hide anything. I replied calmly, opening my own folder. I simply enforced a contract. You seem to have forgotten the specific terms of my father's will. 2 weeks ago, when I first confirmed you were sleeping with Julia, I invoked the fidelity clause. Marcus stared at me blankly. The what? The fidelity clause, Sterling explained, sliding another document forward. It states that if the spouse of the beneficiary commits a proven act of infidelity, any inheritance funds that were previously moved into joint accounts are automatically retroactively classified as a revocable loan from the Vance Family Trust. Upon proof of adultery, the trust has the legal right to recall the loan in full, immediately. Elena provided the evidence 2 weeks ago. The recall was processed yesterday morning. Marcus slumped in his chair, his mouth agape. You knew for 2 weeks, and you let me think. I let you dig your own grave. I cut in, but we are not done. Remember those high-risk venture capital investments you were so eager to make last quarter? The ones I advised against. Marcus nodded slowly, looking like a man waking up from a nightmare only to find he was still falling. Well, I continued, my voice devoid of sympathy. Since the company board, meaning me, did not approve those investments, you signed for them as a personal guarantor. You were so arrogant, so sure of your position, that you did not read the fine print of the liability waiver I had legal draw up. I flipped to the final page of the document in front of me and pointed to his signature. I transferred the ownership of those debts to you personally this morning, as per the contract terms regarding unauthorized executive action, I said, closing the folder with a finality that echoed in the silent room. You do not just have $0. Marcus, you are currently in debt to the tune of $4 million. You are not walking away with half my fortune. You are walking away bankrupt. Marcus looked at his lawyer for help, but Friedman just closed his briefcase and stood up. Mr. Thorne, Friedman said, looking down at his client with disdain. My retainer does not cover bankruptcy or fraud defense. I suggest you find a public defender. Good day. As the door clicked shut behind the lawyer, Marcus sat alone at the table. A man who had walked in expecting a payday and was now realizing he had lost everything he never truly owned. It has been exactly 14 days since the gala, and the destruction of Marcus Thorne has unfolded with the precision of a controlled demolition. The title of every major publication in New York, from the salacious gossip columns of the Post to the serious financial analysis of the Wall Street Journal, has been dedicated to his spectacular fall from grace. He tried, in the first 48 hours, to spin the narrative. He hired a crisis management team with the last few $1,000s on his credit cards, attempting to paint me as an unstable, vindictive wife who misunderstood a business meeting. I did not argue. I simply released the video. The footage of him and Julia on the couch, laughing about stealing my inheritance and kicking me to the curb, went viral within 3 hours. It was the final nail in his coffin. The public did not just dislike him, they despised him. Julia was the first to feel the full weight of the fallout. I had her termination papers delivered by courier the morning after the party, but her professional exile was far worse. The video had made her the face of betrayal. She was doxxed by internet sleuths. Her social media accounts were flooded with millions of hateful comments, and she was blacklisted by every recruitment agency in the tri-state area. I cannot even get a job as a receptionist. Elena, please, you have to stop them. She had sobbed into my voicemail before I blocked her number. She was radioactive. Marcus fared no better. The financial ruin I had orchestrated was swift and merciless. Since I had transferred the high-risk debts to his name, the creditors descended like vultures. I received a report that his luxury penthouse, which he had leased under the company name but I had revoked payment for, was raided by the landlord. His Aston Martin was towed from the curb while he was inside a coffee shop, leaving him stranded on the sidewalk while paparazzi snapped photos of his humiliation. He tried to reach me relentlessly. My phone logged over 50 missed calls from him in a single day. He showed up at the lobby of the Horizon building, disheveled and desperate, demanding to see me. He did not get past the turnstiles. Instead, he was met by Sterling, my lawyer. "She is not going to see you, Mr. Thorne," Sterling told him, standing like a granite wall in the lobby. "I just need 5 minutes, please." "I need to explain," Marcus had begged, his voice cracking, hands gripping the security desk. "I am losing everything. Sterling, you cannot let her do this. We were partners." "You were never partners," Sterling replied cold. "You were a liability, and now you are a trespasser. Leave, or I call the precinct." While Marcus was being escorted out of the building he used to run, I was upstairs facing a room full of reporters. I stood at the podium, looking every inch the unshakable leader. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said into the microphones, the camera flashes reflecting in my eyes, effective immediately. "Horizon Ventures is undergoing a complete rebranding. We are severing all ties with the past administration. The name Thorne will no longer be associated with this enterprise. We are scrubbing the stain from our legacy." I paused for effect, then delivered the second blow that would cement my status as the hero of this narrative. "Furthermore, I am personally pledging $5 million to launch the Phoenix Initiative, a legal defense fund specifically designed to help women who have been victims of financial abuse and infidelity. We will turn my personal pain into their shield." The applause was deafening. The public loved a survivor, but they worshipped an avenger. Marcus was now completely isolated. The country club where he played golf every Sunday revoked his membership, citing a violation of their morality clause. His drinking buddies, the men he thought were his brothers, stopped returning his texts. He was poison in the water supply of the elite. But the worst was yet to come. Just this morning, the news broke. The Securities and Exchange Commission had formally opened an investigation into Marcus Thorne. It seemed that in his desperation to hide his embezzlement for Julia's gifts, he had cooked the books. It was no longer a civil matter of divorce. It was a federal case of fraud. He was not just looking at bankruptcy anymore. He was staring down the barrel of a prison sentence. The smell of burnt coffee and stale grease hung heavy in the air of the cramped diner in Queens. It was a far cry from the marble floors of the Horizon headquarters, and light years away from the life Julia had envisioned for herself. I sat in a booth in the back, watching her wipe down a sticky table with a rag that had seen better days. Her manicured nails were gone, replaced by chipped polish and red, chapped skin. When she finally turned and saw me, the color drained from her face, leaving her looking like a ghost haunting her own life. She rushed over, disregarding the customers waiting for menus. Her eyes were red-rimmed and desperate. "Elena." "Oh, God, Elena," Julia stammered, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of my table. "Please, you have to help me. I cannot live like this. I cannot pay my rent. It was Marcus. He tricked me. He said he loved me. He said you were the one trapping him. I was a victim, too." She burst into tears, a messy, ugly display that drew stares from the truck drivers at the counter. I watched her with a detachment that surprised even me. I felt no anger, only a profound sense of pity for a creature so weak. "He did not force you to mock me in that room." "Julia," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through her sobs like a scalpel. "He did not force you to smile at my face every day for 2 years while stabbing me in the back. You made your choices. Please," she wailed, reaching for my hand, but I pulled it back sharply. "I have nothing. No one will hire me." I reached into my purse and placed a small, plain white card on the table. This is the contact for a women's shelter and workforce reintegration program, I told her, standing up and smoothing my coat. They help people start over from rock bottom. It is not glamorous, but it is honest work. This is the last kindness I will ever show you. Do not waste it. I walked out of the diner, leaving her sobbing over the card, and got into my waiting car. My next stop was the Vance family estate. My parents were sitting in the solarium. The atmosphere was somber. The news of the scandal had shaken their social standing, but more importantly, it had shattered their illusion of control. My father, usually so imposing, looked smaller. "We are sorry, Elena," my mother said, her voice barely above a whisper. We thought a union with the Thorne family would secure the company's future. We pushed you. We were blind to his character because we were too focused on the balance sheets." "I know," I replied, accepting the cup of tea she poured for me. "I forgive you for the mistake. But let us be clear on one thing. From this moment on, my life is my own. I will never again marry for a merger. I will never again let anyone else dictate the terms of my happiness. I run the company, and I run my life. Is that understood?" My father nodded slowly, a newfound respect in his eyes. "Understood, Elena." With the emotional baggage cleared, I moved to physical severance. I put the marital villa, the sprawling mansion in the Hamptons where I had wasted 5 years of my life, on the market. I sold it fully furnished. I did not want a single chair, a single painting, or a single memory from that place. I took the proceeds and bought a penthouse on Fifth Avenue with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. It was modern, open, and filled with light. I spent my evenings decorating it with bold art and vibrant colors, erasing the beige, stifling palette Marcus had always insisted on. One evening, as I was looking out at the city lights from my new terrace, my phone rang. It was Sterling. "Elena." His voice was urgent. "We have a development. Our private investigator just flagged a purchase. Marcus bought a one-way ticket to a country with no extradition treaty. His flight leaves out of JFK in 3 hours. He is running." I took a sip of my red wine, feeling the cool night breeze on my face. Marcus was trying to escape the consequences, to flee like a rat before the ship fully sank. "He thinks he is clever," I said, swirling the liquid in my glass. "Sterling, I want you to send his flight details and his current location to the detective in charge of the SEC investigation. Do it anonymously, but make sure they get it right now. Consider it done." Sterling replied. "Oh, and Sterling," I added, a small smile playing on my lips. "Make sure they know he is likely carrying undeclared cash. Let us make sure he does not even make it through security." I hung up the phone. The trap was set. All that was left was to watch it snap shut. The escape plan Marcus had concocted was desperate, sloppy, and doomed to fail from the start. He was standing at the international check-in counter at JFK Airport, his knuckles white as he gripped a passport that bore a stranger's name but his own panicked face. He was sweating profusely, his eyes darting around the terminal like a trapped animal. He handed his boarding pass to the attendant, his heart likely hammering against his ribs, believing he was seconds away from freedom. But he never made it to the jet bridge. Before the attendant could even scan his ticket, 3 federal agents in dark suits materialized from the crowd. They moved with a terrifying efficiency. One moment Marcus was reaching for his carry-on. The next, he was slammed against the counter, his arms wrenched behind his back. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the terminal, louder than the announcements over the intercom. "Marcus Thorne, you are under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, and wire fraud," an agent stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Marcus screamed, a raw, guttural sound of denial. "No, you have the wrong person. Let me go, I am a CEO. You cannot do this to me," but his protests were useless. He was hauled away in front of hundreds of onlookers, many of whom had their phones out, recording the final, pathetic collapse of a man who thought he was untouchable. By the time the sun began to set over Manhattan, the image of Marcus being shoved into the back of a police cruiser was flashing across the giant digital billboards of Times Square. The ticker tape beneath his humiliated face read in bright red letters, "Former Horizon Ventures CEO apprehended attempting to flee country." It was the most beautiful headline I had ever read. I stood in my corner office on the 45th floor of the Horizon Tower, the city sprawling beneath me like a kingdom I had reconquered. The office was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding on the streets below. In my hand, I held a glass of vintage Pinot Noir, the deep red liquid catching the last rays of the dying sun. It tasted of oak, berries, and absolute victory. My phone buzzed against the glass surface of my desk. It was a text message from Sterling. He is in federal custody. Bail has been denied due to flight risk. Given the amount of money involved and the fraudulent passport, he is looking at 15 years minimum. It is over. Elena. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 2 years. 15 years. He would be an old man with nothing but regrets by the time he saw the outside world again. I picked up the fountain pen lying next to my phone. The divorce decree sat before me, the pages crisp and white. The judge had granted an expedited unilateral dissolution this morning, citing his criminal status and abandonment. I did not hesitate. I pressed the nib to the paper and signed my name with a flourish. Elena Vance. Just Elena Vance. I glanced at the tablet displaying the live stock market feed. The financial analysts on television had predicted a crash, warning that the scandal would sink the company. They were wrong. Horizon Ventures stock had surged by 18% since my press conference. The market loved a clean slate. My net worth had not just been preserved, it had grown significantly. I was richer, stronger, and more powerful than I had ever been. The heavy oak doors to my office creaked open, and my new executive assistant, a sharp young man with impeccable credentials, stepped in. "Ms. Vance," he asked respectfully, "the board of directors is assembled. They are waiting to formally vote you in as chairwoman. I will be right there," I replied, my voice steady and assured. I downed the last of the wine and set the glass on the desk. I looked down at the diamond band on my left ring finger. For years, it had felt like a trophy. Lately, it had felt like a shackle. I slid it off, feeling the skin underneath breathe for the first time in a decade. I held it over the metal wastebasket by my desk and let go. Clink. The sound of the ring hitting the bottom of the bin was sharp, final, and infinitely satisfying. It was the sound of a heavy chain breaking. I smoothed my blazer, grabbed my portfolio, and walked toward the door. I did not look back at the trash can. I did not look back at the empty chair where Marcus used to sit. I stepped out into the hallway, my heels clicking a rhythm of power against the marble floor. I was no longer the betrayed wife. I was no longer the victim in the shadows. I pushed open the double doors to the boardroom, and as the sunlight from the floor-to-ceiling windows flooded over me, I stepped into a new era that belonged entirely to me. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please comment down below where you are listening from. I would love to hear your thoughts and connect with you all. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.